All right, welcome everyone. We're Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we're here, of course, for podcast number 25.
Number 25, indeed.
25. We're quarter centennial.
Well, yes, but not of years. Of
right.
Podcasts. So that's like half a year. Yeah.
So we've been doing this around 6 months, Jacob.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, just pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
So, for today, the topic will be power systems.
Power systems.
But before we get into that,
we have to give a shout out to one of our VIP patrons,
yes.
Unknown Eidolon.
You are
been
awesome.
A huge supporter of us for
Since the
longest
beginning.
time, since the beginning. Yeah, we really appreciate your support, dude. It means
we really
a lot.
do. Yeah.
All right, moving into it. We are done with the Star Wars movie
that's right.
type things. That was a fun experiment for us for a month, but now we're back into specific story aspects.
Right.
And this one, I think, is very apropos because we are reacting to a couple shows that have very unique power systems.
Yes.
Hunter x Hunter and JoJo's in particular. And we're not going to really focus on JoJo's this episode. We're going to focus on a whole myriad of power systems in stories that have really connected with us to be something special.
Yeah, because it's like one of the things with power systems is that there's no one right way to do it. Like that's something you hear a lot when you're talking about doing anything creative, but especially with power systems, because people want power systems for different things.
Exactly.
Some people want it to have like concrete rules where you can say like, hey, look at that clever thing that the character did with this power system that you know the rules for. Or it can be like, hey, we want dragons and magic and,
right.
Cool
It could be something along the lines of having some crazy visuals, especially if it is in a TV show or movie narrative. If it's in a book, it could have something that ties directly into a character's growth, and it's not really about communicating anything about the world in general.
Right.
And in some other ones, there can be some kind of philosophical stint to it, where you're more of talking about the conflict between characters and what that means in like a metaphysical sense.
Sure.
And the power system is just a way to visualize that.
Right. And it can also mean like be representative of those things that we just don't really understand.
Right.
That mystery in the world and giving it actual like direct impact on what happens.
Right, and that kind of structure is something that allows for some really creative spins on conflict between characters. Because in general, when you're doing fantasy or sci-fi, but generally fantasy, you want to see what is that fantastical element to the story.
Right. Yes.
What's that bit that elevates it above the mundane aspects of our world here and now today. And usually there's some kind of magic or some kind of force, like in Star Wars, some order of people that have access to some kind of techniques or powers
mystical abilities
are beyond what humans should normally be capable of doing. But there's usually some kind of tie-in to the real world in a way that makes it somewhat realistic, and then some are so bombastically out of left field that you really have no connection to reality. And that's why I think we're going to not really talk about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, even though JoJo's is fantastic. We're also not that far into JoJo's as far as story goes, so we don't really feel like we can speak too much on the way they're doing things there.
But the big one, like Hunter x Hunter, that is a total power system, and as a power system, it is very much not the ones where like for instance like Lord of the Rings or something where it's done for like mystical purposes and stuff like that. But it's like, no, this has rules. You can understand them. You know why things work and how things work, because they have a very clear goal in mind. They're like, hey, we want to have a shonen where the fights are smart.
Yes.
Where you can look at the characters and be like, that person's really clever. It's not that person is just like stupidly powerful and create big energy blasts that just destroys anything, but that they actually used their own wit, their brain, to defeat their opponent.
One of the things I particularly like about Hunter x Hunter's power system is you can see how the progression works as a character gets stronger and more proficient with Nen. But also, in particular, when someone is utilizing Nen, you know exactly, like, what kind of things they're generally going to be able to do. And that sounds a little bit contradictory. You know exactly what they're going to be able to do generally.
Right, because they put in so many possible combinations there by having, the 6 different Hatsu specializations and all the different things that you can do with 10 Ren, Zetsu, and Hatsu, to make it so that way you can discover what can be done with the system and have it still make sense. They're not just blowing things out of their butt for the sake of, stopping some plot MacGuffin or whatever that exists.
Yeah, and having the specializations within the whole aspect of Nen gives there this limiting factor that tells us as the audience that the main characters aren't ever going to branch out into these ridiculous sides of things, but they're more of going to particularly hone in on their specific talents and get those to be more and more effective and be more and more creative in their usage against different types. And that aspect I think is kind of fun because that's showing a little bit more of what life is like. And I find that Hunter x Hunter wants to continually remind you that this is a coming of age kind of going from childhood to maturity storyline by showing that what life is really about is not necessarily just your decisions, but your ability to adapt with the decisions made by other people in the environment around you. So as long as you're adaptable, as long as you're taking care of, life, 90% how you react to it, then you're gonna do okay. You're gonna do okay. But every once in a while, something bad can happen. Something that you couldn't have predicted, and you'll get horribly countered, so to speak, by life, aka the power system. Yeah. And there's nothing really you can do. And that's kind of powerful.
Yeah, and this isn't the only way to do it. No, it's not. Hunter x Hunter does it very well. But sometimes you want magic to feel just magical. You don't want it to be something that's understood. Yeah. A lot of Ghibli movies do that, where they make the main characters feel very familiar, but then the creatures and the spirits and all that stuff will be very different. So really both work, and especially when you're making a story, it's up to you to determine what you feel would best fit in the story that you're making.
Right. That's why something like Lord of the Rings in particular has that kind of mystical element to it, where there are wizards and, all kinds of magical creatures and such, and walking trees and dark lords and high elves that are immortal and such. It all fits within the context of telling this grand narrative, but none of them are ever delved in deeply, integrally to the details of why they work a very specific way and why they don't work another way.
Exactly. You know that Gandalf uses his staff, but you don't exactly know, how many magic points does he have? What spells can he use?
Exactly. So things having the artistic consistency is, I'd say, important for a show, or a story like Lord of the Rings, because you're then taking this from the standpoint of, okay, does this break immersion? No, it doesn't break immersion. If anything, it adds to the immersion because everything feels magical, everything feels brilliant, everything feels fantastical, and that's something that has made Lord of the Rings in particular stand head and shoulders above any fantasy story out there with regards to influencing the way fantasy is portrayed.
Right, because it chose what it was going to be, and it owned that.
Right.
If it had say tried to say as there are these rules for Gandalf's magic, halfway through, you'd be no.
Yeah, where does that fit in the prose of Tolkien?
Exactly.
It does not. Yeah. It does not at all. And that's why I think that a lot of people could assume Lord of the Rings doesn't really have a power system, when actually it does.
Right. And it just chooses to not get into the mechanics of it.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's kind of where it bleeds into something else that's a little bit on the mainstream side, is Star Wars. Star Wars has a little bit more inconsistent power system when regards to something like Lord of the Rings, but the thing about it is that Star Wars is focused more on the philosophical side, that which ties the characters to the grander conflict. You know that someone that delves into their deeper emotions that tend towards darker things like fear, hate, and anger, they tend towards the negative side of the conflict, antagonizing the heroes, and therefore tapping into the dark side, the dark aspect of the power system, aka the Force.
Right, and it's kept very simple, but it's there to show the state of the characters, right?
Exactly.
To get at their inner turmoils and things like that.
And a lot of these power systems will do that. They'll delve deeper into the characters and make their conflicts feel more meaningful, because it's not just people telekinetically, moving things with their mind. It goes beyond that. It's talking about their actual internal state and the emotions that will help develop those characters into who they'll, become. Later into the story.
It's making it so that there's a visual representation for their emotions, so that they can talk about their emotions, or whatever, if they want, or have that be shown. But then they also have the telekinetic stuff and things like that to spice it up a little bit. In the same way that if it was all telekinetics just for the sake of telekinetics, and that was it might feel a little bit
flat.
Hollow.
Yeah.
A couple of our favorites that really do a good job of balancing between those two.
Yes, it's
are Avatar: The Last Airbender and Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood.
Yes, these two shows perfectly, in our opinion, do the middle ground.
Right.
Bit, where they're not going to go full philosophy and full artistic flair.
Right.
And they're not going to go full mechanics either.
But they'll have enough mechanics so that there can be times where the characters come up with things, and you're like, that's really smart. That fits within the rules of the system. But they're not going into like, all right, there's a test, in 10 episodes. Make sure you understand how all this works, right? They keep it simple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in particular with Avatar: The Last Airbender, as you know, we're huge fans of this show. The bending aspects really delves into the artistic side of it, I'd say, more than the mechanics, whereas Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood delves a little bit more into the mechanics because you know that they're interacting with physical elements that are, the actual components of, materials.
And then a bit more into the philosophy with all the stuff that they go into there.
But with Avatar, they delve into the martial arts bit in such a realistic way that people have actually gone and trained in the Shaolin Northern Kung Fu for firebending, the Bagua Kung Fu for airbending, Tai Chi for waterbending, and then Hungar for earthbending. These techniques are something that actually these techniques are something that actually exists in the real world. So people that come in with that foreknowledge go, oh my gosh, these people did their research.
Right.
So they took something that realistically, anyone could do in the real world and added the fantastical element to it, which when you think about it in the terms of a kids show, you want to have those moments of being able to self-insert yourself into the main characters so you can feel, invested more into the story.
Yeah.
But when you have the martial arts bits to be something that someone could actually learn in the real world, people can then fill in with their imagination. Oh my gosh, I'm firebending right now. Oh my gosh, I'm airbending.
And also, here's the other thing, because one of the big problems that I have with like superhero stories, right, is anytime you have someone that can do something to, they have telekinesis or whatever, right? That should not require any motion on the part of their body, right?
Yeah.
So there would be things where it's like, oh, someone ties them up, and it's like, I have them captured, and it's like, no, you don't. They're telekinetic, or they can control fire, or whatever. They can just burn the ropes off, or something. But they'll pretend like, because narrative, it has to go that way, that, oh no, you've captured me. Whereas because they establish through showing, not telling, that you need to use this martial art in order to bend, that makes it so that you're like, oh, okay, when this person is tied up, they actually can't bend.
Yeah, when they're immobilized, they're basically useless now.
And
they can't do anything.
And then that makes it so that, like, when Iroh does that thing where he doesn't use any martial technique, he just breathes fire, that's even cooler. Because he's breaking the established rule.
Right. And same thing with Boomy when he's locked up in the cage.
Yeah. Like,
when he just is able to just lift his chin, and that's enough to send some earth to be able to break him out. The developments in Avatar evolve the system in a way that is somewhat internally consistent to where we believe that these are natural next steps, even though they're technically breaking the rules pre-established by the system.
Like when, and I won't say what they are just in case for some reason you haven't seen this amazing show, but when they come up with like more specific ways that they can use bending that have not been, established as possible before, they do it in ways where it's like, yes, I was waiting for that.
Right.
And it's just...
It makes you feel invested as a viewer. Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood does this in a slightly different way, in that there's a lot more morality choices based on the fact that all these people that have the ability to manipulate matter via alchemy are essentially playing as little gods.
Right.
They have the ability to mess around with the dirt of the world, so to speak.
Yeah.
But there's this feeling that there's this higher power that's like, you're using my dirt, right?
Right, yeah.
And it's like, wait a minute, what does it mean to claim the power of, this system as your own when actually you don't know where power truly comes from?
Exactly.
And it gets to these kinds of philosophical questions where you're questioning, wait, just because you can do something, it doesn't mean you should.
Yep.
And Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, won't spoil anything, it does this fascinatingly well with the consequences of people utilizing this power system for their own selfish reasons.
And here's the thing, because when it comes right down to it, right, we think of power systems and we're like, yeah, they're awesome. They let these awesome things happen in stories. Wouldn't it be cool if we had them? But that's not what make power systems really interesting.
Right.
It's not what you can do. It's what you can't do. It's the costs associated with it.
Yep.
It's the drawbacks.
Yep.
Superman is kind of a boring superhero as it is.
Yep.
And if he didn't have kryptonite, it would be completely pointless. And most of the reasons why people hate Superman is because his powers seem to have no limits.
Right.
You know, he's strong enough to do anything. He's invulnerable enough to stop anything.
Yep.
You know, all that stuff. Whereas then, say, a lot of the reason why people like Batman way more is because he has those limitations. There are things that he can't really do. So when he does stuff, that makes it even cooler.
Right.
One of my favorite examples of this that, like, just focuses on it so much is Deku from My Hero Academia.
Yep.
If you haven't seen My Hero Academia, get on that. But with his whole little deal, there's an insane bonus that he gets from it, and an insane
almost Superman levels.
Yeah,
in some ways.
almost Superman levels. But there's also this insane drawback, so it doesn't break the plot, right? In fact, adds to it because now you're wondering, how is he going to use this? Because like he can't use it now, like that would be very bad,
right.
even though it might solve this problem. So what's going to happen?
Yep.
And even though it's not really like a system in and of itself, it's a very basic like if you do this, then this happens.
Yep.
So
very
I
nice
really
cause
love
and
that one.
effect. Yeah, MHA really does something interesting in that it has somewhat of a system within the system. Deku's struggle through, mastering his quirk is a system within itself of the quirk kind of society that is within MHA. And having, the decision to make things kind of like Syndrome's wet dream from Incredibles, where everyone's super, so no one is, creates kind of an interesting aspect where people are kind of regarded as, not really equals because, there's, those with just naturally better quirks than others. Someone like Todoroki doesn't have to worry about someone like Sero. So that's something where it's just like, that's an interesting aspect of explaining how even in the real world we have to deal with the fact that people are sometimes born into situations where it's just not equal. They have extra bonuses in life that are going to give them a natural advantage over others. But someone like Deku, who can come in without a lot of those advantages, be essentially given the boon for not necessarily anything that he, just the happenstance or luck, but because someone saw something in him and he earned it, this gave him the ability to rise up to those people that were given that natural advantage, but he still has to struggle with it. So it makes it a system within a system.
Right.
Now, did we talk about the last one that's your special one in particular?
So this one I absolutely love. Okay, so if this is from a book series, but it still isn't finished. But it's by Patrick Rothfuss. It's the King Killer Chronicles. I highly recommend it. The prose is amazing. Like it's a pleasure just to read it.
Yeah.
But they do a magic power system in this, but they make it so that there is actually a distinction between the magic system and the power system.
Right.
There's the one where it breaks all the rules and it's just magic and it's magical and that's the point of it. And then there's the ones where it's very much based in like science and stuff, even though the things they're doing are impossible, right? But even then with something like, say, Hunter x Hunter, where it goes into like, okay, these are all the different like areas of specialization and stuff, this one keeps it very, very general. But there are enough rules to it, and there's enough exploration of the system in the stories where when characters do stuff that's smart, you're like, that is bloody brilliant. More people should be thinking of stuff like that, and what a way to get out of this sticky situation you were in. I don't normally recommend stories just because of like, power systems or whatever, or prose, but if you haven't read it, like it's really good. They're big, so it takes a while to get through them. But
and it's not finished.
No, it's not finished. The third book still needs to come out. But
so Pat Rothfuss, the King Killer Chronicles.
The first one is The Name of the Wind. The second one is The Wise Man's Fear. But like,
check it out if you haven't.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, power systems in general lend themselves towards developing an aspect of the story and the world building by their own nature.
Right.
But one of the cool things about power systems is they somehow bring the characters' conflict to a grander scale and give them the potential towards things that they wouldn't have been able to do previously. A lot of these systems center around a particular character who goes from not being a part of this system to acquiring knowledge and or proficiency or mastery within this power system.
Right.
And it allows them a way to battle their own inner demons, their external demons, defeat an evil empire, save the princess, save the galaxy, save the world. And those kinds of things are integral for the hero's journey, is having them essentially learned something from the wizened mentor. But a lot of these systems in particular that are in here don't center around, people just like kind of learning that bit there. They go on a personal journey, and the system just happens to be something that weaves in and out throughout it perfectly. I like how in Hunter x Hunter, Gon is learning how to interact with the people of the world and how to make friends, just as much as he begins to learn Nen like way later in the story, which is cool because the Nen isn't really a part of the story until much later.
And one of the reasons that works so well is because if you were to go into any story that has any kind of power system, or fantasy or sci-fi or anything like that in general, really, but especially when there's a power system involved.
Yeah.
If you were to go into like the middle of the story or towards the end of the story, you would have no idea what's going on. It would just seem so bizarre, right? So they have to basically sort of ease you into it. Yep. They have to make it so that you are on board with the system. You buy into it. You're like, okay, this is cool, and I respect that this isn't just random stuff that's going to cause random stuff, but like there's actually a method to the madness.
Yep.
Even if it still is along that line of it's mystical and we don't understand it.
Right.
So in the case of, say, Hunter x Hunter, they kept the Nen from being in the story for a long time, and they built up the Hunter exam and all that stuff so that when it was introduced, it felt earned. It felt like this actually special thing.
Yep.
Now, some stories don't do that, and they actually get meta and want to sort of poke fun at that, like, say, One Punch Man or whatever, by having the person start out super OP, and that's part of the fun of it, right? It's the romp. The whole point is that it's just madness, and it's great.
Yeah.
But, based on whatever kind of, like, audience you're geared towards, you kind of need to choose, like, what approach you're going to take
what
to the
angle
power
you
system.
need to take, because it's not going to be something where you can encompass and create the perfect system.
Right.
You can create one that's perfect for the story that you're making, and therefore you've succeeded.
Yep.
A lot of ways these systems that we've brought up so far are all perfect in their own way for the story.
Yeah.
Some of them have particular flaws if you looked at them objectively outside of the context of their story.
Sure.
But in the context of their story, most of them are nigh perfect.
Yep.
So you get these opportunities to show ways in which your system has these particular positives. And in ways it's not actually the end-all be-all aspect of solving people's problems, of the way for them to actually grow. A lot of times you need people to have a character growth bit, and where actually the power system ends up being a limiting factor in some ways. I remember a lot of times in Avatar: The Last Airbender, there'd be characters that would have to go on like journeys of their own characters, like Toph in the third season, when she's a little bit too, tempted to use her earthbending for their schemes and stuff, which ends up revealing a little bit more about her character. Katara towards the end of season 3 as well, where her waterbending ends up being a temptation as well to utilize it in a way that would be damaging towards her character, but instead focuses more on the character development side of things. Same with something like Star Wars. There's the pull towards the other side of the system, in a way, the light side or the dark side, which ends up having characters waver in their motivations. And
it's those moments of conflict and stuff where it becomes the most real to us, right?
Right.
Because if it was just something of like, oh, I can affect the weak-minded, and that was it, and that was the Force, it'd be like, okay, that's cool.
Right.
But we probably wouldn't think much more of it.
Right.
But whereas when it's like, Yoda's talk with Luke, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, the Force, yeah. It's cool. It's awesome.
A lot of these systems have something that ties it directly to the real world and gives us some grounding so that it resonates with us emotionally, to where we not only get excited about the prospect of, ooh, what are they going to do with this next? It's more of a thing of, oh, I'm actually going to take a little bit of a nugget that this power system ended up being the vehicle by which they taught a character a specific lesson that's essential for their arc.
Right.
And if the system wasn't crafted in a certain way, that wouldn't really have happened as fluidly or as naturally.
Like one of the things that is really, that I would also say is really important with power systems, is it is a part of the world. So it is also part of a world building. So when you make a power system, one of the things that you want to do, especially the weirder it is, you want to think about how that would influence the world.
Right.
So,
definitely.
So something like, say, like the basic is like, okay, in Harry Potter, right? If you have magic, having a school to learn magic seems pretty straightforward. It's like, yeah, there would be something like that, right?
Right.
And it would also make sense that the magic people might not be as adept with technology and stuff because they haven't had to innovate. They've been able to just use magic, right?
Yep.
So having those things like that help make it feel more real. A lot of the times, like,
it keeps the immersion strong.
Exactly. A lot of the times the problems that I'll have with power systems when I'll get into them is they'll say like, hey, we have this really cool power system, but then it's like, okay, well, if that really existed, then why don't people just do A, B, or C?
Right.
You know. So, yeah.
It's one of the things that's a little bit frustrating in a lot of superhero stuff in general nowadays is you have generally the power system localized to a specific character. So you have all these not really contradictory, but kind of these conflicting systems that go along with each other, but then you have moments where they potentially could be interacting, and it's like, wait, why doesn't that cross-pollinate with this part here?
If it's the only someone worthy to wield the hammer, then, like, couldn't Captain America, like, wasn't his whole deal that he's, like, you know, super, like, pure of heart or whatever, and then, you know, there's that, but then Vision can pick it up, but... Yeah.
Right. It's one of the things where generally we try to avoid poking holes in power systems and just looking for the ones that we really, really attach ourselves to, because there's something in them to where we go, oh, we resonate with the idea of humanity's untapped potential and the abilities that we have, like, right at our fingertips if only we knew exactly how to apply ourselves in them or knew how to train ourselves for them, and figure that out as a way to inspire us towards some element of, you know, greatness or just going after our dreams in particular. And I like that all these ones that we brought up here have a pretty typical hero's journey storyline focused with it, because then you know that at some point this power system is going to be the means to be brought back to whatever state the hero or heroes originally was for the benefit of all. Yeah. And I think that power systems in and of themselves can go along the spectrum, like, at any point, and a lot of these points in the spectrum are fantastic. But when you get the ones that, like, emotionally resonate with you, that take you out, not of the story in terms of immersion, but take you back to something, you know, special to you in particular, you've captured a lot of something that's really special with regards to power systems. And I think that if you're a writer in particular and you're trying to design your own power system, really think about, like Jacob was talking about, first your world, then your characters, then your power system. Because I think you can do characters and world building in either order, but if you're focused on, I need to make my power system, first really make sure you've got the world building stuff figured out with how the system fits with your world. Right. And then figure out, like, the interaction between the system and your characters. And you can really create something special as long as it fits with those two original pieces. And
don't feel like you have to, like, okay, I spent all this time working on this awesome thing. Now, as soon as the story starts, I'm gonna, like, throw it all at the audience, because that will usually be a bit much for them. Right. Especially if you're going for something more like middle grade, like what Harry Potter started as. Right. So they waited to do that. You know, Harry spent a lot of time with the Dursleys before he found out he was a wizard. So that can be a very big important thing to help. And also, even with something like Lord of the Rings that goes for the magic where it's magical and doesn't always make sense, they still, for the most plot important thing, the One Ring, they still made it actually very mechanical. Very mechanical. When Frodo puts on the ring, he becomes invisible, and Sauron can see him. Yep. And it affects people's minds.
And it also has all manner of dark creatures that get pulled towards it. Right. And that's where they got things into that nebulous factor while still making it a mechanic. Exactly. So you know that, the ring wraiths can now sense its power now because it's being utilized. Right. But now, like, he's in this marsh, and a dead creature like
Yep.
in the marsh like telepathically like interacts with him and
Yep.
makes him like fall.
Right.
It like made him actually like physically do something.
Right. Things like that, because like let's say like Gandalf fighting the Balrog, right?
Right.
That's that is the magical magic at its finest, right?
Right.
He's
No
fighting a fire
explanation.
demon. There's no
Yep.
explanation.
Yep.
He fights him all the way on top of a
Spectacle.
mountain. He summons lightning to his sword and kills it with it.
Yep.
And then he dies. And you're like, wow, that was awesome. But if they used that as a way to like resolve the main story, you'd be
Right.
like, that came out of nowhere.
Right.
Like, what's up with that? But
Yeah.
since it wasn't for the main story, you're like, that was awesome. That was so cool. I love it.
That's a great point to bring up, is that the closer you get to the main storyline, which usually involves the arc of the main character or characters, you need to have more mechanics if you're utilizing the power system for the resolving of said plot. Otherwise, you run into Deus Ex Machina problems. You run into problems where you didn't properly build up to the conclusion. You also might run into problems where there's just practical inconsistencies,
Right.
where maybe for plot reasons, an ability that worked really well in the past doesn't work well at the end because it's being utilized against the final boss, so to speak.
Right.
And
yeah.
having those consistencies are good, but starting off simple, starting off with a very easy to understand power system that's very, just easy to understand, really avoids a lot of the exposition problems as
Right.
well, but doesn't necessarily mean you're locked into a simple system. You can evolve it and grow it to be
Right.
much more
Yep.
detailed and deep as the story continues.
Yep. And like for Harry Potter, they did that by having Harry not know anything about it.
Exactly.
So they can explain things to him about it as the audience learns about it in this, clever way, so it doesn't feel like they're just spoon feeding. Like, all right, here's a textbook, read it. You know, get ready because you have to fight Voldemort. And by the end of the book or whatever.
Right. It's the same thing they do in Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. The same thing they do in Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yep.
The same thing they do in Star Wars.
Right.
It's the classic hero's journey aspect where you're thrown into a world that you don't fully understand.
Right.
And utilizing the system as a way to incrementally advance the character's progression, not only within the mechanics of the system potentially, but also as a character, is
Right.
another kind of clever way to put little notches in the character's belt along the way.
And by the way, the whole thing of the Deus Ex Machina for when you're wanting to do the magic that's not fully understood,
Right.
you can totally do that. But what you want to do is you want to build it up so that the Deus Ex Machina makes sense.
Right.
Like it feels fitting in the world that you're in.
Thematically,
Right.
just in terms of internal consistency.
Yeah.
There's a couple of the stories that were mentioned in there that had some borderline Deus Ex Machinas in them, but a lot of them had some thematic importance that worked within the story, or some aspect of it to where it was built up to properly.
Yeah.
But it's still, on paper, mostly a Deus Ex Machina, but it still works because the build-up to it worked outside of the mechanics of the actual power system.
Yep.
So yeah, that's power systems, guys. If you want to ask us any questions regarding this podcast or anything at all really regarding to our channel, us, whatever, leave it in the comments below.
Yes.
And we'll answer it in our next podcast. But before we finish here, let's answer some of our previous podcast questions here. Some of these are going to be a little bit Star Wars related because
they're from
last month was all Star Wars and stuff.
Yeah. What's your opinion
question?
on General Grievous?
General Grievous was a mixed bag. He could have been so much more.
Well, and if you look at what he was originally brought up in, because he was originally in the
Animated Clone Wars.
The
2D one that was much more anime-esque than...
and in that, he was terrifying.
Yes.
He was awesome.
Yes.
Like he was a force to be reckoned with. He wasn't the General Grievous will run and hide as he always does.
Right.
Like when he showed up, people were gonna die.
Yeah. General Grievous, when he was originally designed as a character, which is funny because he was designed in that show alongside another character in Star Wars, Asajj Ventress, who ended up becoming canon in the more recent animated Clone Wars series.
Right.
They handled him quite well. I would say he was handled relatively well in the animated Clone Wars series recently, because they blended the aspects of him being the kind of comical coward at some points, but also being a terrifying, unstoppable war machine. In the movies, he's forgettable because he's not given enough screen time.
The fact that he can use 4 lightsabers is cool, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Little Duck asks, recently I've been fascinated by the subject of symbolism in the form of color and music. Things like evolving color schemes and leitmotifs, theme music, to represent a character's development throughout the narrative. What are your favorite types of symbolism used in stories, and what are some other types of symbolism you wish were more common?
My two favorites are related to the weather. They are rain and snow. Snow usually meaning new beginnings, like because everything's just covered in like blank and it's fresh start. And then rain to usually convey some kind of melancholic feeling, or at least thinking about yourself and your internals and things like that. Some of my favorite moments of character growth were either in the rain specifically, or used it as sort of a just a stylistic choice.
Right. One of my favorite, just kind of very basic, like this is used all over the place, is whenever a character is at a very high point and they have a vast kind of view of the land. So whenever you see a
like
character,
Made in Abyss.
Or even something in like that one dream sequence in Pride and Prejudice, there's all kinds of stuff like that where the character surveys a vast view of the land. And they have this moment of existentialism because they realize how small they are, but not only that, they realize how beautiful the world can be if your perspective is shifted a certain way. And I think that characters who shift their perspective in that way end up going through a very unique type of development, because they probably at that point were at a very low place, and then they shifted themselves to a little bit of a higher plane of sorts, and then they're able to see how small some of their problems are, how big some of their just incredible things there in their lives are. I like that symbolism because it's relatable to me, and I really personally love going up to really high points and surveying land. It has a little bit of, I think, the desire in humans to kind of survey and maybe just observe.
Yeah, to be removed from whatever hardships they're currently dealing with.
Right, to be removed and above something that is not necessarily other people, but are things that are ultimately just temporal things that aren't necessarily as important.
Yeah. And then, of course, music is just amazing.
Yeah, but the ones I wish were more common, though. Like, what are the types of symbolism you wish were more common? I feel like it's really tough, because a lot of the symbols that I wish, like,
snow and rain, actually. Like,
you wish?
Yeah, like I have a very positive history with those, but they don't. I don't feel like they're used enough.
Okay.
Music is more of the one that I love, that's most of the time used very well. But I would say snow and rain need to be used a bit more.
For me, it's kind of weird, because when I think about the symbols that I wish were more common, I'm looking at it from my limited perspective of stories, and I don't know if I'm missing out on those symbols already existing in other stories that maybe I'm just not inclined to read primarily. But I like the symbol of and this one's pretty common. I was gonna say the relationship between between beast and human, and I think that there's something there. But more so, I think the symbol of the caretaker. The person who has their garden and they take care of it, but that's their thing. That's all they do. Their entire existence is focused on making this one little aspect of their environment beautiful. I like that limited perfect focus. When a character has that aspect of focus, you go, ooh, I wish I was that focused on my particular area. But I also think the symbolism of what our existence really is just a bunch of people having their little focus, their little perfect focus. And whatever that thing is, you can't know really unless you actually go and experience life with that person. Because they're not going to wear it on their sleeve necessarily.
No.
You might see it with like a sports player or some kind of professional athlete, someone that does their
someone that has
focus.
A craft or something like
exactly. That. But in symbolism, having it be a thing where people are noticing that as they just kind of pass by. I get the picture of people just walking along the street, and they notice for an instant just the people on the side just going about their lives, but they're each focused on one in particular thing. I don't know if that's exactly what you're looking for, but that's just what came to mind for me.
Okay, cool.
All right, sorry about the rambling there.
Oh,
next question is from Impress Play. Caleb, for as much as you talked about Frisbee sport I'm not familiar with, no worries. Have you ever considered or dreamed of becoming a professional player? Yes. More on that. I myself played volleyball, basketball, football. You Americans love to call it soccer, I guess. Haha, nice. But really, I had no real passion for these sports until I discovered calisthenics. Oh, cool. Do you have an unyielding passion for Frisbee? Yes. Yes, it's a little bit crazy. I probably could do it nonstop, and my body is probably still at the place where I could do it with very little rest. Like, just the natural rest on a daily basis that I would have after playing like 2 hours a day or maybe an hour and a half a day, like hardcore would be plenty. The passion is pretty unyielding, but I never really took the necessary steps to do the professional player bit. And I don't want to claim like it was something where I could have gone, but I got injured, or
you took an arrow to the knee.
I wasn't focused enough, or no one noticed my great gifts or something like that. There were specific moments where I decided that I don't need to play it competitively in order to increase my passion for it. In fact, my passion for it has only grown as I've met more people involved with the sport. So yeah, good question. Also from Little Duck, what do you guys want the conclusion of Kylo Ren's arc to be in episode 9? Is it different from what you think will actually happen? Oh, wait.
So what we want it to be and what we think it will be.
Oh.
So
what do I want it to be? Well, okay. There's the redemption arc.
Yeah. But
do you want that to happen, or do you think that's what's going to happen?
I don't want it to happen.
I was going to say that too. I think that what's going to happen is that there will be some kind of redemption arc.
Okay.
But the thing about the redemption arc is not really him becoming a Jedi. It's about them coming together and building something new for the future. And I don't necessarily think that he will live to see that. If you get what I'm saying here. Because like we saw with Vader in episode 6, he doesn't have to live to be redeemed.
Well, here's the thing.
Or he doesn't have to live after like the episode to be redeemed.
I want something a bit more macabre. I want him to die and not be redeemed. Because here's what I want. The big thing that I see for Kylo right now, and this is, I think, the biggest issue that people have with him, is that he doesn't seem to know what he really wants.
Right.
So, since he's claimed that, being the next Darth Vader is what he really wants to be, but he also wants to, be himself and all that.
Right.
I want him to realize that. I want him to come into his own in that and be defeated, and to realize, okay, I'm gonna die, and that's how it is. But I chose what I wanted, who I wanted to be, and I was true to that version of myself as best I could to the end. And maybe I ended up becoming a bit like that Darth Vader that I wanted to be like, even if I probably shouldn't have been like him.
Sure.
Like, I want something more tragic.
I would like the tragic death as well. One of the things that I really like, as kind of they're pulling a little bit of it from the EU, is the Jaina and Jaqen.
Yeah.
Sorry, just brain fart there. Jaina and Jaqen's final conflict being one where Jaina had to kill him, even though there was some part of him that could have been saved. It's the idea that it wasn't something that was on the table fully because of Jaqen's prior choices. Kylo has the potential to be saved. He has the potential to be saved. But what I would like to have happen is a little bit more along the lines with what you're talking about, in that his character has natural consequences coming to him. Just very natural ones.
Yeah.
And honestly, he is holding on to the past.
Yep.
He wants to let go of it, and he says so at the end of episode 8, and I think that's exciting because that's part of what episode 8 was about letting the past die and moving forward. But in a way, he's the biggest hypocrite of the whole thing.
Right, and I think that's why people don't like him as a character.
But that's the thing, though. That's really tragic.
Yep.
He should die in his hypocrisy, not having learned the lesson. He should pass the lesson on to Rey so that she can then now have both the positive side of it and the negative side of it in Kylo and Luke. And then that way, for those that learn about whatever the new Force tradition will be, pass that on going forward.
I see it. So the way I see, like, in my head of it ending is Rey kills Kylo, and it ends up being kind of like a Fate Zero Arturia moment.
Yeah.
Like, like
she is not going to be happy after that.
No. And I really hope that happens. Like the happiest ending I want to happen for Kylo is what I said. I could also see what you're saying happens, where he realizes, like, you know, how futile it's been, you know, for him, or how he's not, you know, held up to his own ideals, even though he claims that that's what he really wants and that's who he really is. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to say the least.
I hope they don't do a cop out and do like another like basic redemption thing or whatever.
Right, because I think they could do, like, I'm gonna play devil's advocate on my own theory, is that they could do the aspect where Rey actually cares for him, and this could be kind of a Revan Bastila thing where she loves him.
Well, in Fate Zero, that also could have potentially been on the table.
Yeah.
But,
But I think that it's really going to be a question of whether or not their connection will deepen in Episode 9, because I'm almost 100% sure they're doing a time skip in between Episodes 8 and 9.
At least like a year or two.
A year, I'd say.
Yeah.
A year. But that time skip can allow them to have Kylo be a little bit more solidified and a little bit more dangerous.
Right. Yeah.
Because he hasn't necessarily dealt with his own internal issues. He's just
right
kind of shoved them down a little bit. And yes, and he's the only true threat, which makes him essentially the most emotionally unhinged but focused, dogged kind of
That's
villain.
why I'm so excited, because it means that all the conflict will probably revolve around what happens with him, which is why if they do something...
Well, him and Rey.
Yeah. But, Rey will be the one to solve the conflict, but the conflict originates because he exists still.
Right, but her and his connection could be the other factor to capitulating this arc. Also because their connection probably isn't over in terms of
the Force bond.
The Force bond, yeah.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
And there also could be some aspect of where they pull directly from the EU, where, you know, if one dies, they both die, or if
I don't think they'll do that.
I don't think they'll do that.
I don't think they'll do that.
I think that's about as crazy as it can get. But but another thing could be in that if Rey was to kill Kylo, it wouldn't be right. There's another aspect of it where Kylo needs to be the agent of his own destruction. I would like also that to be another aspect of my hypocrisy theory, where it's not that we do an Emperor thing all over again, or we do a Vader thing all over again. It's somewhere in the middle where he ends up not stereotypically like, oh no, my own device is destroyed,
and I fall from a great.
But he realizes his place in the universe isn't to be in this way. He needs to find his redemption in the afterlife, in being a Force ghost. That could be kind of cool.
That could be cool. I definitely think Kylo will be the agent of his own destruction. Yeah. I just hope Rey puts the last nail in the coffin.
Well, I think Rey will bring him all the way up to that point where he realizes that.
Gotcha.
Which is essentially opening the coffin.
Right.
But when she realizes that he's willing to accept the good in him, she would be the one to try and pull him back out of it. And then he would be like, wait, no.
So it really depends on how they want to do Episode 9. Like, because they can...
J.J. Abrams...
They can do whatever they want.
You have a lot of weight.
And a lot of options.
And a lot of options, but you have a lot of weight on your decisions. So
no pressure.
No pressure.
Yeah.
We wish you the best of luck, my friend. Because Lord knows you have a history when it comes to endings. So we hope you...
Although I don't know if he actually worked on those endings.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah. Anyways.
So, all right, guys, it was a lot of fun.
It was.
We'll have the next podcast up on next Monday.
Yep.
And if you want to have any questions for us,
Leave
them in the comments below.
Yeah.
And if you want to keep regularly updated with us, be sure to check out our Twitter, check out our Patreon. Got all stuff going on in there. We've also got our website up. You can check that out. Also, the link in the description below.
Yes.
And yeah, we'll see you guys in the next one. But until then, Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we'll see you all next time.